All right, so today we're going deep on a film that's, well, it's kind of legendary.
It really is.
Akira Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress,
Ah, classic.
1958, black and white samurai film. And get this, it's basically the blueprint for Star Wars.
I was going to say, whenever anyone asks for a place to start with Kurosawa, I always point them right to this one.
Really? So, like, even someone who's not that into samurai films or older movies.
Absolutely. It's just a really fun, exciting adventure story.
Yeah.
But it's also got that Kurosawa depth to it. You'll see what I mean.
I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
Well, for starters, it flips the whole hero's journey idea on its head. Instead of following some, noble warrior, we see everything through the eyes of these two bumbling peasants.
Like Tahi and Madashichi, the ones mentioned in the source material. They didn't exactly sound like the sharpest tools in the shed.
Oh, they're anything but. Imagine the two most inept, cowardly guys you can think of, stumbling upon a hidden stash of gold.
Oh no, I can already see where this is going.
Greed takes over, chaos ensues, it's a whole thing.
I bet. But they're caught up in some kind of larger conflict, right? The source material mentioned a princess and a general.
Right, so these two, they're just trying to make off with the gold, completely oblivious to the fact that they've stumbled right into the middle of this huge power struggle. The gold actually belongs to General Rokurota Makabe, played by the incredible Toshiro Mifune, and Princess Yuki.
Okay, so we've got royalty, a legendary samurai. This is quickly becoming more than just a couple of guys trying to run off with some treasure.
Exactly. The general and the princess are the last remnants of this defeated clan, and that gold is their only hope of restoring what was lost.
Okay, so you've got the classic on-the-run adventure, but with these two knuckleheads mixed in. Sounds like a recipe for disaster, but also some good laughs.
Oh, it's a wild ride. But here's where it gets really cool, cinematically speaking. This was actually Kurosawa's first film shot in widescreen.
Really? Wow, what year was this again?
58, and the format he used was called Tohoscope. It gave him so much freedom to create these breathtaking, epic shots.
I bet. I can only imagine the landscapes.
Oh, they're incredible. But it's not just about pretty pictures, although he does deliver on those. He plays with perspective constantly, showing us scenes from the point of view of the peasants, the general, the princess, even the enemy.
Wow, shifting perspectives like that, that's pretty advanced, especially for that time.
It is, and it adds so much depth. Because you're not just getting one side of the story, you're seeing how everyone's actions and motivations play off of each other.
It reminds me a little bit of how Star Wars handles those big space battles. You know, jumping between what Luke's doing and then cutting to Darth Vader, then back to the rebels.
It's that same kind of energy. You're absolutely right. And that's no coincidence. George Lucas was hugely influenced by The Hidden Fortress. He's talked about how much he admired Kurosawa's style.
Okay, so we've got this really unique dynamic with Tahe and Madashichi. Then layered on top of that, you've got this classic struggle, but told in this really innovative way that went on to shape some of the biggest films ever.
That's The Hidden Fortress in a nutshell. Kurosawa was way ahead of his time.
It sounds like it. Well, let's get back to our bumbling peasants for a second. They might be kind of pathetic, but they're also important, right?
Exactly. Don't underestimate Tahe and Madashichi. They're not just there for comic relief.
Because we're seeing this whole adventure unfold through their eyes.
Exactly. They're our way in. And through their journey, as ridiculous as it can be, Kurosawa makes us ask some really interesting questions about heroism, greed, and what it really means to succeed. You know, it's really kind of remarkable when you think about it.
What's that?
How Kurosawa takes these two characters, Tahe and Madashichi, who are basically defined by their flaws.
Oh yeah, they're definitely flawed.
Totally. But through them, he explores these really complex themes.
Like what?
Well, greed, obviously, that's front and center, but also loyalty.
They show loyalty.
In their own way, yeah. And even moments of, believe it or not, bravery. It makes you realize that heroism isn't always about, grand gestures and selflessness.
Right, it can be a lot more complicated than that.
Exactly. Sometimes it's just about doing the right thing.
Even when you'd rather run off with a giant pile of gold.
Especially then. But you mentioned something earlier about The Hidden Fortress and Star Wars.
Oh, yeah. The source material pointed out some pretty compelling similarities.
There are tons. I mean, at its core, The Hidden Fortress is a classic adventure story. You've got a princess and a seasoned warrior trying to restore what's been lost.
Sounds familiar.
And they're aided by these two, shall we say, unconventional helpers who provide a lot of comic relief along the way.
Okay, I'm definitely seeing the parallels now.
It's like the blueprint for Star Wars. I mean, Swap out the samurai for spaceships and lasers, and you've basically got the same dynamic as Luke, Leia, C-3PO, and R2-D2.
Wow. Yeah. I never thought about it like that before, but it's so true. The bumbling peasants are like the proto-droids.
And the similarities, they even extend to the editing.
Oh, really? How so?
Lucas has actually talked about how Kurosawa's use of wipes between scenes in the Hidden Fortress, which was a pretty new technique at the time, it really influenced the pacing and the visual style of Star Wars.
Interesting. I can see how that would create that same kind of fast-paced, almost episodic feeling.
Precisely.
Okay, so to recap, we've got this incredibly innovative film, visually stunning for its time, that also happens to be hilarious and full of adventure. Right, and it grapples with these profound themes about like what it means to be a hero. It's no wonder The Hidden Fortress is considered such a classic.
It's incredible how well it holds up, too. The action sequences are still just as exciting now as they were back in '58. The humor's sharp, and those themes we were talking about, the loyalty, the betrayal.
Yeah, the whole messiness of human nature, right?
Exactly. It's timeless.
It makes you think about how some stories, they transcend time and place.
Totally.
And they become these kind of universal myths that we keep coming back to.
That's a great way to put it.
But even though it's got this epic scope, The Hidden Fortress still manages to feel really grounded and relatable.
Right, because at the heart of it, you've got these characters that, flaws and all.
We can't help but root for them.
Exactly. You want to see them succeed even when they're making the worst decisions.
Well, except when they're trying to run off with the gold that isn't theirs.
Okay, true. But even then, it's hard not to find it a little bit endearing.
I think that's the beauty of Kurosawa's filmmaking, though, right? He never loses sight of that human element.
Absolutely. Even amidst all the action, all the spectacle, he never lets us forget that we're watching a story about people. Real people, with all their complexities and contradictions.
It's what makes his film so powerful. So we've got this visually groundbreaking film, hilarious, full of adventure.
And incredibly influential, don't forget.
Right, that too. But it also makes you think, really think, about what you're seeing. What's not to love?
You're singing its praises, and rightfully so. But, it's funny. When it first came out, not all the reviews were totally positive.
Oh, really? That surprises me.
I know, right? It's such a beloved film now. But there were some critics back in the day who thought it was a little bit too entertaining.
Too entertaining? How can a film be too entertaining?
I know, it sounds crazy, right? But some critics felt like it was maybe a little too Hollywood for a Kurosawa film.
Interesting. I guess even back then, Kurosawa had a reputation for making these really, serious, heavy-hitting films.
Exactly. So to see him release something as purely fun and adventurous as The Hidden Fortress, it kind of threw some people off guard.
Fascinating. But in a way, doesn't that just make the film even more interesting?
Totally. It just proves that Kurosawa, he couldn't be put in a box. He was a master of so many different genres and styles.
So maybe those early critiques were actually, accidentally highlighting what makes The Hidden Fortress so special.
I think so. It's a film that works on so many different levels. It's a thrilling adventure, it's a thought-provoking drama, and it's also just a really fun time at the movies. There's something for everyone.
I love that. So whether you're a diehard Kurosawa fan or you're just discovering his work for the first time, you're going to find something to appreciate in The Hidden Fortress.
100%. And speaking of discovering Kurosawa...
Okay, so you were saying, speaking of discovering Kurosawa, what makes this one a good entry point?
Well, Kurosawa's films, they can get pretty intense.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that. Like emotionally heavy, right?
Yeah. Tragic endings, complex characters wrestling with big moral dilemmas.
Not exactly lighthearted popcorn fare.
Right. But The Hidden Fortress, it's different. At its core, it's an adventure story. Fast-paced, exciting, full of humor.
Okay, yeah, I'm getting that vibe.
It's a fun ride, which makes it a great way for newcomers to dip their toes into Kurosawa's world, before diving into the really heavy stuff.
Makes sense. Sometimes you just want a movie that's going to sweep you away, right?
Exactly. And here's the thing, even though The Hidden Fortress is super entertaining, Kurosawa, he still sneaks in those bigger questions.
About morality, you mean? Human nature.
All of that. Take the ending, for instance. Now, I don't want to spoil anything for our listeners.
No spoilers.
But let's just say that Tahei and Matashichi, despite their, shall we say, unconventional methods...
And their constant scheming.
Oh, constantly scheming. But despite all that, they end up reaping some pretty significant rewards.
Interesting. So it's not your typical good guys finish first kind of ending.
Not exactly, and that's what's so brilliant about it. Kurosawa makes us question those easy answers. It makes you wonder, is luck as valid a path to success as, courage or virtue?
A good question. I mean, in real life, things aren't always so black and white, are they?
Exactly. The Hidden Fortress leaves you with these questions that linger long after the credits roll.
That's the mark of a great film, I think. Something that stays with you, makes you think.
Absolutely. So, for those of you about to watch The Hidden Fortress, and I highly recommend you do,
Yes, definitely do.
pay attention to how Kurosawa plays with those deeper themes. The loyalty, the greed, the complexities of being human. It's all there, right alongside the action and the humor.
And don't forget to keep an eye out for those elements that George Lucas might have borrowed.
Absolutely. It's like a cinematic Easter egg hunt.
So much fun to be had. Well, on that note, we'll let you all go forth and discover the Hidden Fortress for yourselves.
Happy viewing, everyone.
Until next time.
Yeah.